Hello class, today we're talking about self-efficacy and motivation. So I want to start by talking about some myths about motivation. Now some people may say that there are kids or students who have no motivation versus students who do have motivation, and I'd like to think about motivation slightly differently. People might have different degrees of motivation rather than just a lack or absence of motivation. For example, we may see students show less motivation in terms of academics, and we could say that they have no motivation for school, but reality is that they have motivation, but maybe it's a motivation to not feel that they can't succeed that prevents them from showing or intent or interest in school. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of myths with motivation is this idea of competition. Some people argue that there's such a thing as healthy competition, particularly in the classroom, that it motivates students to complete assignments or to engage in discussion, but it's rather unhealthy. So we'll continue that discussion later on in the PowerPoint. So in understanding motivation, most of the motivation research is on achievement motivation. And motivation overall is this propensity or preference to engage in a particular behavior. So I might be motivated to do well in school or motivated to play a particular sport. Motivational research often focuses around the topic of why someone does or does not do something. And there's actually several questions that research is trying to address. The first one is, can I succeed? The second one, do I want to do this? And the third one is, why am I doing this? So we're going to be talking about those today. As I said, most of the research is focusing on achievement motivation, or what does motivation look like in the school context. There's a lot less research in terms of what motivation means, maybe in the health field or pursuing healthy practices or motivations for that, or in any other area. So the majority of research has been looking at the school context. So those questions that we ask ourselves in terms of motivation are really lenses that we use, theoretical lenses, to explain different areas of motivation or different ways of thinking about motivation. So when we address the question, can I succeed, we're going to be taking a social cognitive lens. When we address the question, do I want to do this, we'll be taking an expectancy value model, an attribution model, and an interest and affect model. And when I address the question, why am I doing this? We'll be taking two models, the self-determination theory model and the goal orientation model. So again, each theoretical lens is providing a different view of motivation. So we get to examine 6 models today. So let's start with the first one. Can I succeed? Now, this question derives, as I said, from social cognitive theory, and one of the proponents of the theory, a large proponent, is Albert Bandura. He argued that there's an intersection between sort of the behavior people engage in, the environment that they live in, and these person or individual level factors, and that it's within and that these altogether influence an individual's behavior. That within the person there's this thing called self-efficacy, and it's how capable or competent one feels. And depending on the environment I am, this level of self-efficacy is going to influence my behaviors. Now, I can feel competent and capable or have self-efficacy in different areas. So for example, I could feel competent and capable toward a particular task. So maybe I feel great in my capacity to reupholster chairs. I could feel competent or capable in a particular domain, so maybe math or science. And I can also feel capable or competent in a particular role, maybe as parent or spouse. Now, Bandura argued that self-efficacy beliefs are what provide the foundation for human motivation, and beyond that, for the well-being of the individual and for a sense of accomplishment. Now, how competent and capable I feel, or these efficacy beliefs, are shaped by a variety of factors. Benter's research focused on 4 influences. The first one was performance. So my past performance dictates how competent and capable I feel in the future. So for example, in my domain about math, if I consistently received F scores, my past performance is going to lead me to have low levels of efficacy or not feel competent about my math skills, given my past performance in math. Now, if I received a lot of A's in my past performance, then that would lead to beliefs of I feel competent and capable of succeeding in this domain. Another factor of influence is vicarious learning. Through observation, through those around us in the environment, we learn about our own sense of competence. So for example, if my brother didn't succeed in school and I see him consistently fail, I might think that I also do not have the capabilities of succeeding in school. Here's a brief cartoon for you. I know how you feel, little brother. I was the last one in my first grade class to be pre-approved for a credit card. But in all seriousness, the people or environment that are around us influence. Now we're observing the behavior so we can learn vicariously by watching their experience. But they also provide us encouragement and persuasion. Now, as we talked about previously, adolescents and children are encouraged or influenced by those significant others around them. So it could be peers and it could be family that provide encouragement and persuasion. So if I'm cheered on or I'm provided encouragement about a particular domain, maybe cooking, then that may make me feel that I'm competent and capable in that area. Now, we also have to be conscious of the emotional and physiological reactions that we have, since it also influences how competent and capable we feel. So for example, I have nightmares about math tests. Then that physiological or emotional sensation or feeling that I have for math also reinforces my efficacy beliefs. I may not feel that competent, and the dream reminds me, those nightmares remind me that I'm not competent or don't feel competent. If I feel stressed out about a particular exam, my body gives me a physiological reaction or response. I may have sweaty palms, may not be feeling well in my stomach, and those again feed back into my efficacy beliefs, so how competent and capable I feel. Now let's think about your past experience. So how many of you believe you can get an A in this class? Take a moment to think about that. Why do you think you can get an A in this class? Maybe you have other A's in your past child development classes, so previous performance influenced your efficacy beliefs. Maybe vicariously you see other people get A's in my classes, and so maybe you think then, yeah, I can get an A in this class as well. Maybe you have an emotional response coming to class. You're excited and you do the readings and you know that, there's an A along in the way. So think about what are the beliefs that influence how competent and capable you feel towards a particular task or a particular role or a particular domain. That's self-efficacy. Now, as I said, most of the research focuses on education, but there's some research in other areas. I'm particularly interested in research on self-efficacy and health. So some of the research that I look at examines sexual self-efficacy, how competent individuals feel refusing sexual demands or asserting their sexual needs. Research suggests that young men report higher confidence in asserting their sexual needs, so being able to tell their partner what they would like sexually. But they report lower confidence in refusing other sexual demands. And The opposite is the case for women. Women show lower confidence in asserting their sexual needs, but higher confidence in refusing the sexual demands of others. Now we could think about how maybe gender norms influences these sexual expectations. We do know that higher sexual efficacy is linked to safer sexual behaviors, particularly when these occurred in casual partner relationships. So research that has looked at the hookup scene with emerging adults finds that emerging adults with higher levels of self-efficacy report safer sexual behaviors. Now, there's also condom self-efficacy. So feeling competent and capable in purchasing condoms, carrying condoms, or using condoms. And oftentimes, this sense of competence predicts later intentions and use of condoms. So the research that I look at in examining adolescents finds this association between feeling competent and engaging in condom practices and later intentions to use condoms. The next question we're going to address with motivation is, do I want to do this? And we have 3 theoretical lenses we're going to talk about. So take a moment to ask yourself, do I want to go to college? You're here, so you asked yourself at one moment, and the answer for you was yes. So what do you expect a college education will give you? Is it going to give you financial stability? Is it going to give you prestige? Is it going to give you access to a wider network of individuals? So what do you expect that college education will give you? And moreover, do you value that? Those are the questions that we ask ourselves from this theoretical lens, this expectancy value. These are a series of cognitive theories that examine what a person expects from a given activity and how much value they place on what's expected. So, what do they expect to get out of a college education, and how much value do they place on that? Now, this research, in terms of expectations, examines the attributions that I make. So, early theories on attribution looked at what are the expectations, or what beliefs or attribution an individual assigns to a particular outcome. So why did something occur? We examine attributions on 3 dimensions. The first one is locus, and this influences self-related feelings. Locus is where I place the force. Is it an internal force or an external force? And I'll give you more examples in a second, in the next slide. So if I place the locus internally, and that would mean that I did great on a test because I'm smart. That's an internal attribution I can make. The next one is stability. It influences the expectancy I have of a particular outcome. Now, I can believe something is stable or unstable, or in other terms, whether something is fixed or malleable. So, being smart may be something that is fixed and stable, not something that an individual can change. They either have it or they don't. Controllability is the 3rd dimension. This influences feelings towards others. So, as the word suggests, something that I can control or not control. So the rain is something that I do not control, so that's something uncontrollable. So attributions are going to occur when I assign a cause to an outcome. So here are some examples of attributions made on those causal dimensions. So notice at the top, you'll see locus, and it can either be internal or external. On the left-hand side, you'll see stability, and it could be stable or unstable. And now, below locus, we have controllability. So if something is controllable or uncontrollable. So for example, if I take a look at locus, and let's look at external locus of control. So that could be something outside of me that influences how I did. So I got an A on the test because it was a sunny day. That's something that is external, and it is out of my control, and it's probably unstable. So it just happened by chance that it was a sunny day, and that was the day that I had my test. Now, there are things that are external to me that are also uncontrollable, but that are a little bit more stable. And so maybe the difficulty of child development courses. That's something that is external. It's out of my control, but there's some stability over time in terms of the difficulty or challenge of child development classes. Now, in terms of locus, external but controllable factors. Now, something that I can control and might be stable could be sort of how the professor views me. If there's issues of favoritism, I may argue that that's external to me. It's something that is stable, and depending on how I act, how much control I have over it. Now, something that's external to me and controllable, but it's unstable, is the assistance or support that I get from friends. Those may vary over time, not something that I can predict, but sort of may shift or change. All right. Now those are the external factors. Now let's take a look at internal factors. So again, the locus is internal. Now there are some things that are uncontrollable. So a particular aptitude or being smart, as I mentioned earlier, is something that's sort of a stable trait, or I interpret as a stable trait, and it's not something I can control. It's something I either have or I don't have. Now, something internal to me, but that's unstable, could be the health of the day that I took the exam. So I might not have done so well, but that was because I was feeling sick, or I had a headache, or I had, some health issues going on that day. That's, again, outside of my control, but it is internal to me. All right. There are some things internally that are controllable. So internal and controllable is long-term effort. So the extent to which I put in effort, not just today for a particular exam, but overall in terms of my educational career, that's something that's stable, is predictable over time. It's internal to me, and it's something that I control. I determine how much effort I want to put into something. Now, also internal to me and controllable, but unstable over time, are the skills and knowledge I have. So while you might have been, putting effort in your courses last year, you may have a new course in which you aren't as familiar with. You don't have the skills yet. So there's sort of shifts or lack of stability in terms of particular knowledge required over the length of your career. And so that's internal to you. You have control over the amount of knowledge you gain for a particular task. But again, it's unstable as it sort of shifts depending maybe on context or situation. All right. So notice also that there's two types of efforts here. The long-term effort, you can think about your effort in terms of your educational trajectory versus short-term effort or situational effort, which is more unstable or varies depending on the class you're taking or the exam that you're currently taking. So short-term effort is unstable, but long-term effort is stable. Now, to synthesize all of this, let's focus in on 4 attributions. Most of the research focuses on these 4. It examines effort as internal, unstable, and controllable. Again, this is looking at short-term effort. So how much do you study for a particular exam? That's the effort that you put in. That's internal to you. You determine how much effort you put in. It's unstable because what you might put in for the next exam might be different than what you put in for the current exams that you have. And it's controllable. It's up to you how much effort you put in. So it's internal to you, it's unstable, and it's controllable. The next one is ability. This is an internal quality that you have. The idea is that it is stable, that you can't change it. You either have it or you don't have it, and it's out of your control. You were either born with it or you don't. You don't have it. Now, the next one is task difficulty. This is something that's external to you. It is stable and it's out of your control. So how difficult, child development classes are, or how difficult a particular exam is, that's external to you. It's a stable trait, but it's out of your control. And luck, it is an external factor. It's unstable and uncontrollable. So I wanted to summarize these 4 attributions and give you some more examples about that. What does it look for adolescents? Now let's examine that first one, effort. As we said, it's internal, unstable, but completely controllable. An adolescent may say, I failed that test because I didn't study enough. If I put in more effort, I can succeed. Next time I'll have a study group and get tutored. And we really want individuals to be doing effort-based attributions because that's something that's internal to them and they control it. If it's ability-based attributions, those are outside their control, and what happens is that they may develop hopelessness because they feel that they don't have that trait, and that's not something that they will sort of gain. However, we need to understand effort as a factor that has variable intensity. So I can do a lot of effort or I can do a little bit of effort, as well as direction. I can put in effort versus sort of decrease my effort or remove my effort. Now, we need to consider that effort, unfortunately, is a double-edged sword. It has this compensatory trade-off. So, you may have heard somebody say, talk about their sort of their attributions. So this young girl says, it takes me a long time to read and I work hard at studying. If my friends knew how much I had to work to get that grade, they would think I'm not smart enough. So notice that while putting in a lot of effort may lead to the positive outcome, the amount of effort may suggest or have implications for the ability of the individual. So that's sort of that compensatory trade-off. Now, effort also impacts ability attributions. So this young woman says, I study hard and I go to class. That's why I have an A. This next gentleman, he's saying, I only studied before class and I partied all night and that's why I failed. Now, both of these teenagers can infer high ability, and they're both avoiding inferences about having low ability. So the amount of effort that they put in or not allows them to make attributions of high ability. This young man could say, well, the only reason I failed was because I partied all night. I'm smart, but it was because I put very little effort. The young woman here is arguing or suggesting that she studied hard all night and she was able to make a high ability attribution. And as I mentioned, we want students to make effort-based attributions rather than ability-based attributions, because ability is uncontrollable. It's something that is not something that we can shift in them or that they can shift in themselves. And it's something that's stable. And in a bit we're going to talk about praise and encouragement. When we make ability-based praises or encouragement, we have students sort of think about things that are uncontrollable to them. When we make effort-based attributions, those are things that are much more controllable for the individual and internal, something that they could change. Okay. The next attribution is task difficulty. This is external to the individual. It is stable over time, but it's out of their control. That test was hard. The questions were too much. I didn't do so well because the teacher made it hard. So that's something, the teacher's the one that's creating this difficulty, and that's external to the individual. Now, this could be a difficult teacher, so sort of stability in expecting difficult exams from this individual. The other one that we have is luck. This is external to the individual. It's unstable because I might be lucky today, but I may not be lucky tomorrow. If I eat my Lucky Charms, then I'm going to get A's on the exams, or hey, we won the game because I wore my lucky socks. Again, these are things that are uncontrollable by the individual, unstable from day to day, from week to week, and are external. So we really want to focus and sort of retrain our sort of brain or thinking process in terms of effort-based attributions, that something occurred due to effort, rather than making ability-based attributions, particularly when we're talking with adolescents or young children. So when you see grades get posted online for your classes, maybe those midterm grades or just your grades the previous quarter, what type of attributions do you make? Do you say, that's right, I aced my classes because I worked hard? Or do you say, I aced those classes because I'm smart? Or, wow, I don't know how I got that grade. It must have been my lucky socks or those Lucky Charms. Or do you say, well, I got an A in that class because that was an easy class? Or to the contrary, I got a D in that class or a C in that class because that was a hard class. So think about the attributions that you make. The next theory is one of my favorites. It looks at the individual's interest in a particular task or activity. This theory is called the theory of flow by Csikszentmihalyi. So the argument that he has is that individuals are in this optimal challenge, this arrow here in the middle, or in a state of what he called flow, when the skills that they have, which is the bottom axis, and the challenges that they encounter match up. So if I have low skills, but the challenge is also low, I'm in a good place, right? I'm in a state of flow. That's the right challenge for me. In the state of flow, I'm sort of mesmerized. I'm engulfed by the activity. I am focused. There's nothing else in the world occurring that I'd rather do. Nothing else has influenced me. I'm enjoying this. That's the state of flow. Now, if my skills are high or higher and the challenge is low, I might experience boredom. This class is, easy, and I have lots of skills, or let's say I'm playing a game, and maybe the game is just too easy for me. I'd like, something a little more challenge. If it's too easy, so the challenge is low, and my skills are sort of high, I might experience boredom. Now, on the other hand, if my skills are low and the challenge is high, I might experience frustration. If I don't feel like I have the competence or a particular skill needed for, let's say, math skills, and the challenge is a little bit higher, I'm going to experience frustration with that. So I'm not going to be in that state of flow. Now, on the extremes, over here you have anxiety. If I have really high skills and the challenge is really low, I'm going to begin to question myself. What's wrong? Maybe I'm not thinking of this correctly. Why is this so easy? Or if my skills are really low and the challenge is too high, I may also experience anxiety because I don't feel that I can accomplish this. So we want, let's say, students to be in this state of flow, in this space where the challenge and the skills match up. Let's see what students think. Research that looks at students' experience of flow, this is elementary students, say that students report this flow in these 3 areas in blue in the center. There are some things that are low skill and low challenge, like watching TV or listening to music. And when they're doing that, they're in that state of flow, right? They're just listening to that jam or that song, and nothing else in the world matters. You know, their parents may be calling to them, or there may be homework that they need to do. They can just ignore everything because they're in this state of flow listening to that song. There are things that require a little bit more skill. So, for example, friends, they may require communication skills, relationship skills. And so the challenge is a little bit higher, but if individuals have those skills, those moderate levels of skills, that they report a state of flow. So envision a conversation that you're having with friends. You can have that conversation anywhere, ignoring those around you, or things that may be happening around you. Now, the other area that students report as having flow is art and sports. They believe that they have high skills in those areas, and the challenges that are placed in front of them in those areas meet those skills. Now, unfortunately, children don't report flow, or that sort of intrinsic or experience of being so involved in learning and sort of engulfed by the experience. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen in other areas, such as the humanities and social science. Children often report that they have high skills in those areas, but that the challenges don't meet up. Maybe they have, boring report projects to do, and are reading about a historical moment, right? They say they have the skills, but the challenges just are not there. So they experience boredom. Now, there are other areas, like the sciences, that they report also not being in a state of flow, where they feel they don't have the skills, that there's a high challenge, high demand for this, but they don't feel they have the skills needed to succeed. So again, they experience anxiety and they experience frustration. So how do we get children and adolescents and students to be in that state of flow in the sciences, in social sciences or other sciences? So, have you ever watched kids play video games? Right? They're so involved in the game. The skill they have to succeed in that game matches the challenge of that game. Right? They can play for hours and hours. People can be calling their names. They might even be hungry, but they don't want to leave that game. So how do we translate that? How do we convert that state of flow into the classroom? Notice the picture on the right. Those children don't seem that they're very much in flow. Have you ever had a group project or a group activity in class where you just felt so involved? It didn't matter what was happening, what the other groups around you were doing. You just were so involved in answering that question and doing that particular activity. We have to think about, how do we create these experiences for students? The last question that we're going to ask is, why am I doing this? So let's take a look at your reading habits, or think about them. Why are you doing or not doing your reading? to understand the why people engage in certain behaviors or activities, we have self-determination theory. This looks at initiation and regulation of activity. So why would somebody start doing? So why do you start doing your readings? Because there's that quiz. Because there might be questions in class. So why do people initiate a particular activity and regulate? Why do they, continue to engage in it? So from this lens, we can look at the rewards that that a particular activity provides us. Now, I can be intrinsically interested into something, or intrinsically interested or pressed by, or extrinsically influenced. Have you heard of these terms before? Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So, I might engage in reading articles for my research because I'm interested in it. Intrinsically, I find them fun. Reading more and more peer-reviewed studies. I really do. Extrinsically, I might be also influenced because maybe to keep my job, I need to be reading empirical studies. To be able to teach my classes, I need to read empirical studies. So individuals initiate and regulate activities because of these intrinsic or extrinsic rewards. Now, I also initiate and regulate activities for different reasons. So it's influenced by my innate talents or personal interests. So I might engage in piano playing because I'm a great piano player and I have an innate talent or ear for listening to the piano and being able to play by ear. Or maybe I have a personal interest in learning about the piano. And so that influences me to start a particular activity, piano playing, and continue on it. All those lessons, let's say, on piano. Now, my self-determination is also influenced by environmental opportunities. Now, if I never had the opportunity to have piano classes, that's going to influence whether I initiate playing the piano. I might be influenced in terms of the sports I engage in. If there aren't those opportunities to play those sports in my environment, that might create difficulties in whether I engage in it. So, the next one would be autonomy support. So, if the significant others around me, let's say my family, encourages me to explore or engage in behaviors on my own that I feel are important to me, that would be autonomy support, as well as optimal challenge, if the challenge meets my skills. So that's similar to Csikszentmihalyi's theory of flow, right? That skills and challenge meet up. So again, I engage in particular behaviors or engage in particular activities because of the talents that I may have or interests I may have. The opportunities are around me. The capacity or interest to engage in it independently, or the support I have for engaging in something independently, and whether I have the skills to match the challenge. So think about the opportunities that the adolescents have, or the young children that you work with have. What talents do they have that influences whether they persist in something? Maybe they have a talent in terms of art or dance, and they continue to engage in that activity because that interest. Maybe they're interested in playing soccer, and maybe there's opportunities in their neighborhood or their family to play soccer. All right. A related outcome of being intrinsically interested is engagement, level of student engagement. So let's take a look at what engagement looks at. It's something I'm always interested in my class. As an instructor, I want my students to be engaged, to show high levels of engagement. And there may be different ways to examine that. So research suggests three different ways of looking at engagement. The first one is behavioral engagement. So what students do to participate in the learning experience behaviorally. So they might raise their hand in class to ask questions. So that's part of the conduct. They might just show up to class. They might complete their homework and complete it on time. Right? All of that would be behavioral engagement. Now, if I see students that don't raise their hand or may miss classes, do I assume that they're not engaged? Maybe it's just that they have different types of engagement that I need to consider. So maybe they're emotionally engaged. Maybe they don't feel comfortable asking questions in class, but they're still engaged with the material. They have an affective or emotional response or reaction to the material or to school. So emotional engagement on one end could be boredom. On the other end could be enjoyment. This influences the willingness that individuals have to complete a particular task. So completing the reflections that you have to do. Right? You want to make sure that you have that emotional connection to what you're doing. That way it'll make it more enjoyable to finish. I asked you to pick a topic that you would enjoy for your newsletter, right? Because I know that enjoyment will help with engaging in initiating that task and in completing that task. Now, there's a different type of engagement as well. There's cognitive engagement. This is the psychological investment that individuals have. So one example could be sort of the preference to challenge yourself as an individual, the preference to initiate or engage in challenging tasks, or the capacity to adapt in the face of failure, the capacity sort of to cope with the failures and to say, I'm going to move on, I'm going to continue. I'm going to, engage in this task even though I didn't succeed the first time. So that's sort of the psychological component to it. So you want your mentees to be intrinsically interested. You want them to be invested for personal reasons. We could give them chocolates in case they came to class, but then that would be extrinsically motivated, right? We want them to be intrinsically. And we want them to come to YAL to complete their homework and to get to see you, because that might be an intrinsic motivator for them, to get that attention and to sort of feel good about themselves. How do you think we can build different levels of engagement with the mentees that you have? So remember, we can build behavioral engagement. Do they complete their homework assignments? Do they complete the assignments and questions that you have? Do they go to a particular activity, whether it's rugby or any other activity? How do we get them to be emotionally invested, wanting to, enjoy the things that they're doing there, completing that math assignment, that math homework, doing the readings out loud, or cognitively engaged, making sure that they feel that they can challenge or complete those difficult challenges. So maybe not just read today, but read tomorrow, or read, beyond what's required in that paper. The next theory that we have is goal theory. Goals are these internal representations of a student's purpose for achievement behaviors. So why do they engage in a particular behavior? Now, oftentimes goal theories highlight this dichotomy, these two types of goals. People either set for themselves what we call learning or mastery or task goals. These are goals directed toward gaining more knowledge. So maybe you set for yourself a learning goal for this class. You took the class because you wanted to know more about children and adolescents. You can also set for yourself performance goals. These are also called ego goals or ability goals. These are goals directed toward external comparisons and demonstrating superiority. Did you take this class to be the top scorer? Did you, let's see, what else could we set goals for? When I play on the Wii with my husband, I often set for myself performance or ego goals because I want to have the top score on the snowboarding game or the top score on the basketball hoops or the tennis game. Now, in terms of my research, I haven't set for myself learning or mastery goals. I want to gain more knowledge on what it means to be an adolescent, specifically, what does sexuality and substance use mean to those adolescents? So the goals that we have implications for what we do. So for example, this young man has set for himself a learning or mastery goal. I'm going to watch all those PBS videos so I can learn more about the teenage brain. So just engaging in a particular behavior because they want to learn. They want to master that content or knowledge. Now, here we have two individuals doing performance goals. Now, it could be a performance approach goal. I'm going to get the highest grade. I'm going to be better than the whole class. So I'm going to tackle that test. And you wait and see. Versus performance avoidance goals. I'm not going to try out for the team so people don't know how bad I am. So when I set for myself these performance or ego or sort of comparison goals, they can really be detrimental as they will make me avoid particular behaviors because of those social comparisons. And do you remember which group of children show high levels of social comparisons? Middle childhood, right? They're constantly seeking peer acceptance, and they're engaging in a lot of these social comparisons. So we really want to be careful in having them set performance goals. We want them to set learning goals. Now, there's been some research that looks at goal theory in relation to academic success. And this mastery structure or mastery orientation, or what we call learning goals, were related to adaptive outcomes. Students were more likely to be persistent in particular tasks in relation to math. They were less likely to procrastinate. They felt they had more choice. They used more cognitive and metacognitive learning strategies. Do you remember those metacognitive strategies, sort of thinking about their thinking? And it influenced their grades. So the individuals that had a mastery orientation had higher math grades. Student mastery goals also predicted academic efficacy, so how competent and capable adolescents felt in terms of academics. Self-regulated learning, so individuals sort of keeping track of their learning capacities and their skills and making sure that they match the challenge. And lower levels of avoiding seeking academic help in the classroom. So they were more likely to seek. They did not avoid this task. They did not stop themselves to ask for help because they weren't doing any social comparisons. They were doing it for the joy of learning. So seeking help was okay. So again, we want to make sure that the students that we work for set learning goals as opposed to performance goals. All right. So imagine you're in the classroom and we're going to do this competition. We're going to do this activity. We're going to split into two groups, the left side of the room and the right side of the room. Are you envisioning it? Okay. Are you on the right side or the left side? All right, pick a side. We're going to compete for 10 extra credit points. I'm going to ask you questions about the topic we discussed, and each question is points. Now, if you get the question right, your team gets a point, but if you get the question wrong, your team gets -1 point. Did you envision that? How did that make you feel? Would you have been in the classroom and thought, yes, I'm ready. Ask me those questions. I need that extra credit. Or did you say to yourself, oh, man, my team's going to lose if I lose? I should just not say anything. I'm just going to sit in the back here. Try not to make eye contact. Make sure nobody notices me. So, sort of trying to get at this idea of competition and what motivation. And unfortunately, competition in the classroom can be very debilitating. Students are already sometimes at a vulnerable place when it comes to learning. They may not feel efficacious or feel that they're competent in certain areas. And then on top of that, if as instructors we put them in these situations of competition, that could be very dangerous. Competition places students in a very ego-involved, this threatening, self-focused state. I once did a Jeopardy activity, and it was a competition. I did it in the class, and one of the students didn't care what she said or how did she get those extra points, because she was going to get an A. She was going to get the top score in that class, and she was so involved and self-focused. It didn't matter what she was doing, and she was grabbing everybody's papers on one side and moving around over here, and it was just very ego-involved. And so competition can sometimes place an individual in that state. You can imagine other places in that competition exists that may not be so healthy, maybe in sports. Now, I argue that competition, much of the research argues as well, that particularly in education, competition can be very unhealthy. It has a series of negative effects. It decreases self-worth and creates this negative self-worth and self-esteem, and it influences them in students so to the extent where they're not going to want to try. They're going to put in the low effort. So if you envisioned yourself in that competition in a room where your peers are going to look at you and judge you for the number of points that you gain or that you lose, you may want to say to yourself, well, why am I going to try? I don't want to look better. We want to save face, and so we might not engage in behaviors or put low effort in the behaviors. Competition also puts people in this social comparison, sort of sets it up that way. There's winners and there's losers, and that can lead to anxiety. What competition is doing is switching our goals from just learning, mastering a particular idea or topic or activity to what kind of goals. We switch from learning to those ego-involved goals or those performance goals. So because this competition leads to sort of this global and uncontrollable sense of ability, it's out of your control whether you win or you lose. It creates sort of an emphasis on ability, whether you have it or not have it. And it can be, that's why it can be very detrimental. And I always question when, as teachers, maybe our students are already struggling with math or science, or maybe they're struggling at home with, difficulties with the family or their siblings, or maybe they are in a risky neighborhood and get to see a lot of, stress and violence in the neighborhood. And on top of all of that, we're going to put this competitive space in the educational system. So it's sort of, debilitating in many ways. So why are we going to put students in this position when they're already coming in as vulnerable? So there are alternate approaches to motivating students that do not involve competition. In the classroom, we can encourage. We have to be careful what we're saying, because it may not be encouragement what we're doing. We may be praising, and that focuses a lot more on the individual. If we tell somebody, you're so smart, unfortunately that can endorse compliance to a particular behavior, or teacher dependence. So the student will only perform when you're there as a teacher, or when the parent is there to be able to tell them about how smart they are. We always want to use encouragement instead of praise. Encouragement focuses on a particular behavior. Wow, you wrote 5 paragraphs today. Wow, you read 3 chapters. Focus on the behavior. That's linking back also to attributions. The child can make an attribution about effort rather than about ability. Now, praise can not only is detrimental for the individual we are giving the praise to, but also to those around them. So, if I praise Sally for being so smart, Stacy that's right next to her may think like, oh, wow, that's a trait that Sally has. I don't know that I have it. So, again, always focusing on encouragement rather than praise, and being specific, focusing on effort rather than ability. Now, there are rewards, as one of our theories suggested, right? Individuals are motivated or pressed by rewards. There are some that are intrinsic to the individual, and we want the individuals to find those. But there are others that are extrinsic, that really motivate young children. And so, for example, we may use what they want as a positive. So in middle childhood, they want social acceptance. They want their peers to like them. So maybe a reward for a particular activity or performing could be compliments from your peers. One positive thing that you can say about this individual that might influence students. Now, we may have tangible rewards. So maybe we give chocolates every time students raise their hands. We want to do them every now and then. We want to do them when they don't expect them. If the individual expects a particular reward, they're only going to perform the behavior when the reward is present. And they begin to lose interest, intrinsic interest in the particular activity, even if they were interested in it before the reward was introduced. There's research that looks at young children and their use of felt pens. And one group of kids was told, you can use the felt pens anytime you like. This is one of the options in terms of all the many options of toys that you have here. And the other group was told, okay, you're going to get, let's say, chocolates or money or this external reward when you use the felt pens. When the reward was gone, who do you think continued using the felt pens? The kids that were never given a reward, they used felt pens ongoingly in comparison to the kids that received the reward when they used the felt pens previously. They no longer used felt pens to the same extent. Now, there might be other things that aren't as tangible that middle childhood children or adolescents may enjoy, like free time. I'm sure you enjoy that reward if we get out of class early. So we can think about rewards in many different ways. One thing that we can do to increase student engagement and motivation in the classroom is also allow for student choice and control. So remember, you were asking about what to do in terms of your newsletter with your adolescent or your child, I should say. And I said, well, you want to give them choice. That allows them to feel that they're sort of in control of it. The more individuals feel that they had a choice in the response, or they felt that they were in control of it, the more likely they are to be engaged in something. When you believe that you're doing it for your own reasons, or you sort of this internal drive that you have, you're the one in control of it, the more likely you are to engage in a particular activity. Now, in the classroom, we also want to do or create a safe and supportive environment. I'm not going to be willing to, let's say I set for myself a mastery goal to gain knowledge about child development. But along the way, I may have questions, and I may have interpreted things inappropriately, or I may, feel like I don't understand something. And if I'm not in a supportive environment that's safe to ask questions, I may not succeed in accomplishing that mastery goal. So it's really important to be able to have individuals feel competent, feel that efficacy, or set for themselves mastery goals. They have to feel that it's a safe and supportive environment, that if they fail, it's okay. Now remember, being able to cope with that failure is that cognitive engagement. Let's say you are now an after-school program coordinator or coach of a group of students. Select a particular theory and describe your philosophy on motivation. So in one sentence, you're going to describe your philosophy and why. So my philosophy of motivation is based on, pick a theory, as it suggests that. So my philosophy of motivation is based on Bandura's self-efficacy theory, as it suggests that individuals pursue activities or engage in activities if they feel competent and capable in doing so. Research on parents suggests that they engage in particular parental practices that lead to healthier developmental outcomes if they feel competent and capable. So if I'm teaching a parent education class, I want to make sure that individuals feel that they can succeed, that they have parental efficacy, or feel competent and capable in their parenting skills, as that's going to lead them to engage in the particular practices that I'm teaching them. I want to make sure that I know that efficacy beliefs are influenced by vicarious learning. So maybe in my parent education class, I have students role play so that they feel that they can learn from others while observing others, and maybe we watch videos. I want them to go home and practice their particular parenting behaviors, because we know performance influences efficacy beliefs. I want to make sure they feel comfortable, make sure that there are no negative emotional responses when they think about a particular parenting behavior. Communication about sex with their adolescent, right? Making sure that we remove sort of the negative emotions that may be tied to that, and maybe even place positive emotions associated with that, because that's going to influence their efficacy beliefs. So think about your philosophy. All right. Make sure you jot that down, as I'm going to ask you about it later. So just to sum up, these are the theoretical lenses we went through. We covered 6 theoretical lenses. So social cognitive theory, that was self-efficacy and Bandura. Expectancy value models, what do you expect out of a college education, and do you value that? Attribution theory provides those causal interpretations in terms of why people engage in a certain behavior or have a certain outcome. interest and affect. We looked at flow, why people initiate or regulate particular behaviors. We looked at self-determination theory, as well as goal orientation. So think about which one your personal beliefs align with in terms of the theoretical lenses. And how do they influence maybe how you interact with the children that we're working with?